Now that it's February, I'm sure a lot of you are getting ready to start seeds for your gardens this spring. What better time to go over the 5 mistakes you should avoid when starting seeds indoors? And at the end, I'll give you an extra tip on what you should do so you don't mess up everything you did getting your seeds started successfully inside. Stay tuned. Mistake number 1 is using the wrong type of soil. So when you start your seeds indoors, you want a light, airy, well-draining soil, a seed starting mix that allows the roots to basically penetrate through the soil. You don't want to use your garden soil or a heavy potting soil because those will become compacted and can get waterlogged. So one thing I like to avoid with my seed starting mix is I like to avoid nutrients like fertilizer in the seed starting mix. I don't want a bunch of fertilizer in the seed starting mix that could potentially burn my seedling when it emerges from the seed. I don't want all that fertilizer in there that is going to be a little too much, because this is just a little baby plant coming out of there that it doesn't need all that fertilizer right away. So I try to avoid any fertilizer in my seed starting mix if possible. So one seedling mix that I've been using now for the past couple years with my giant pumpkin seeds is this Sungrow Black Gold seedling mix. It doesn't seem to contain a lot of fertilizers, nutrients. I don't see them listed on the bag. So that's one thing that I can control the amount of fertilizer I put into it. Actually, with my giant pumpkin seeds, I don't really put any fertilizer into the soil. I give them some biologicals, but I don't add any new fertilizer as they're just starting out. So just one, if you want to look into it, you can. It's one that's worked well for me. Before we get any further into this video, could you please leave a comment and let me know if you're new to gardening, if this is your first time starting seeds indoors, just kind of what experience you have. I'm just kind of curious who this video is reaching and wondering if people are, here to learn something new, if it's their first time. Yeah, just let me know. Thanks. Mistake number 2 you want to avoid when starting seeds indoors is getting your soil too wet. You don't want to waterlog your seeds. Otherwise, they're just gonna rot in the ground and they won't germinate. So what you wanna do is you wanna add enough water where it starts to clump up. And then you want to, and it's gonna be hard to see on camera, but if you take a chunk in your hand like this and you squeeze it really tightly, you should see just a drip of water come out. So if you squeeze it, you should be able to get just one drip of water out. And then your soil is wet enough, but you don't want it too wet. So that's what you should look for when you are adding water to your soil. You don't want it too wet. Just where you can get a drip of water out, and then you should be good. I've had really good success with my giant pumpkin seeds, pretty much 100% germination every time with this wetness of the soils. Another thing I wanted to mention is if you are using peat pots to start your soil, it's a good idea to poke holes in them to allow for extra drainage. And it is a good idea to get the peat pot wet before you put the soil in it, because otherwise you get the soil to the correct moisture, and then the minute you put it into the peat pot's going to soak the moisture back out of the soil. So to maintain the correct moisture in the soil, you'll want to get your peat pot wet. So I just run mine under my kitchen sink until it gets nice and wet. Not like waterlogged, but so it's not going to be soaking the water out of the soil. So just an extra tip I wanted to mention. Mistake number 3 that you want to avoid when starting seeds indoors is planting your seeds too deep. Basically, depending on the type of seed, The depth is going to be different. For this watermelon seed, it's going to be not quite as deep as the pumpkin seed that I have here. Notice the size difference. A good general rule of thumb is to plant your seedling or your seed 2 to 3 times the diameter of the seed. So for this watermelon seed, it's going to be planted roughly a 1/2 inch deep, whereas this pumpkin seed is going to be closer to a 1/2 to 1 inch deep. And so for when I start my seeds, I like to just push them into the soil. I don't necessarily make a hole ahead of time. I just basically push them into the soil until they're down, to the correct depth. And then I cover them up gently with the soil. I like to pack it down a little bit, but that's a good way to plant them, is just to push it into the soil and then cover them up afterwards. It takes extra time if you go through and make the holes ahead of time. I haven't found that helpful at all. It just seems like extra work to me. So you just push them in. Don't push them too deep, because what will happen is they'll either have trouble germinating, or if they do germinate, they may have trouble getting out of the soil and getting to the light that they need, and they may rot in the ground. So don't plant your seeds too deep. Mistake number 4 is having your seedlings at the incorrect temperature. You don't want them too hot or too cold. For my giant pumpkin seeds, I like them to be around 75 to 80 degrees. Somewhere in that range seems to be ideal for me for getting them to germinate. But different seeds are going to have slightly different temperatures. I think around 70, 75 is pretty good for most seeds. It may just, if it's a little too cold or too hot, it may just slow it down a little bit. But if you have it like way too cold, they may not germinate. They may just rot in the ground. But if you also have it too hot, you may burn the seeds and they may not germinate either. Some different ways that people maintain the correct temperature is have a heating mat with a thermostat on it. I've seen people put them in their ovens with, depending on how many you have, but in their ovens with just the oven light on. But if you do that, make sure to have a note on the oven that nobody starts the oven while your seedlings are in there. I've also seen it where people put them on top of their fridge because it gets a little warmer on top of the fridge. So those are just some ways. So this is what I've done for my giant pumpkin seeds the last 5 years, basically since I started growing giant pumpkins. But what I'll do, and I'll do this on the floor typically, but I'm just showing you right here, is I'll put a towel down, and this helps maintain some of the temperature so it doesn't get too cold. It doesn't take basically your surface doesn't absorb the heat from what you're doing. And then what I'll do is I'll take a clothes basket. I got this clothes basket. It's actually broken on the bottom, so this is why I use this. But what I'll do is I'll take and put my seedlings in their containers inside the clothes basket. So I'll stack them up. I usually end up with this thing full of seedlings. And then what I'll do is I'll take these milk jugs and I'll fill them up with hot water. Hot as I can get out of my sink. I don't know what the actual temp is, but then I'll put them on each side of the clothes basket, and I take a sleeping bag and I put that over top. So one sec, I'll go grab the sleeping bag. Okay, I'm back with the sleeping bag. So I'll just take a sleeping bag like this and I'll put it over top of the whole thing. So I'll put it over top of the water bottles, the towel, all of this. And what it does is it takes the hot water and traps it all under here. And so I end up having to switch the water out, probably twice a day typically. I'll probably do it morning and I'll do it night. And then within 3 days, my seedlings emerge. And I've checked the temperature of the soil while mine were while it's warm under here. And they're usually around 80 to 85 degrees. And I've had super good success with this. It is a little more work to have to heat up the water bottles, but it is better than doing nothing. And I didn't have to spend any money on a heating mat. It's just what I had around my house. The fifth mistake you want to avoid with seed starting indoors is inadequate lighting. So this is after your seedlings emerge and they come out of the ground. Right when they come out of the ground, you want to provide them with good lighting. I know a lot of people like to put them in their windowsill, but the problem with that is a lot of times your plants are going to get leggy. They're going to reach for the light. If you have to do it, you have to do it. The trouble is if it's not sunny for a few days, that the plants are going to get really leggy and reach for the light. So if possible, having a grow light would be ideal. This grow light actually has a timer where I can have it on for, like the daytime hours, so like maybe 12 to 16 hours a day, and then off at night. So it mimics the more like outside what it would be like. But you want to keep your light close to the plant. You have to test your light to make sure if you have a light that it's not going to burn the plant. This one doesn't seem to cause any issues with the plant. So I like to keep this, a few inches away from the top of the seedling. I don't have a seedling here, but if I did, I'd want it right about here. And as the plant grows, this light can actually telescope up and grow with the plant. So I just have to move it up as the plant grows. If you don't have a seed starting or a grow light, but you do have under cabinet lights in your kitchen, I've used those for years. I just got this light this year, but I've used the under cabinet lights, and they've done a really good job for me at keeping my plant fairly short and stocky and strong, and not getting leggy. So I'll end up on my counter, I'll stack up some like shoe boxes or something to get them up close to the lights, and then I'll set this container up on top right under the under cabinet lights, and they've done a really good job. The only problem is you have all the seedlings on your counters in the way of everything, but if you can do that with your under cabinet lights, those are another good source of light. That's done well for me. So try to avoid not providing light, because if you leave your seedling right when they emerge, like say if I left it in that clothes basket right when it emerged and didn't do anything with it for a week, they would get like super tall and fall over, and you'd have a lot of trouble with your plant not being very strong. So providing adequate light is key. Thanks for sticking around for the bonus tip I have for you. So after doing all that work to get your seedlings to grow, to germinate, to grow, the last thing you want to do is put them outside and kill them right away. So what you want to do to avoid, is putting them outside right away. What you want to do is what they call harden them off. You want to put your plants outside, for a little bit each day as it's warm enough to be outside and not too windy. You want to put them where they're kind of protected, but put your plants outside. Probably start off, I usually like to start off with like maybe 2 hours the first day, 4 hours the next day, 6 hours the following day. So I'll put them outside and then I'll bring them in at night or after the number of hours. So basically what you're doing is you're getting your plant, instead of them being in this perfect environment inside, and then you put them out in the elements, and then they go through transplant shock, or they just go through shock from the different environments, from the wind and stuff. What I like to do is slowly get them used to that outside environment. So you don't want to take your plants that have been you've been babying for the last couple weeks and then throw them outside and then they just die, and then all that work was wasted. So that is a bonus tip that make sure you follow, because you don't want to waste your time on all that work that you did to get them to where they are at this point. So thanks for following along. If you have any questions, just drop a comment. If you have any other tips that you think I should know, I'm always open to learning new things. So thanks.